What if the biggest lie you were ever told about life is that after 50, your story is already written? What if the truth is the opposite? What if the first half of your life was only preparation, and the real life begins the moment you finally wake up? Most people spend decades running after success, responsibilities, expectations, and approval. They follow the path that was placed in front of them. They become who the world told them to become. And one day, somewhere after 50, something strange happens. The noise begins to fade. The things that once felt urgent no longer feel important. The approval you chased for years suddenly feels empty, and a quiet question appears in your mind that you cannot ignore anymore. Is this really the life I want to live? Many people panic when this question appears. They think it means they are lost. But according to Buddhist wisdom, this moment is not confusion. It is awakening. Because the moment you start questioning the life you built is the moment you finally become free enough to rebuild it. In this video, we are going to explore the truth no one tells you about starting over after 50. Why this stage of life can actually become your greatest advantage. How regret can guide you instead of trapping you. And why the most authentic version of you may still be waiting to emerge. Because sometimes, the most powerful transformation in life does not happen when you are young. It happens the moment you finally see clearly. You are not late. You are finally awake. Most people believe awakening happens early in life, but very often it arrives much later. In your younger years, life moves very fast. You wake up each day with tasks waiting for you. School, work, relationships, responsibilities. You keep moving from one goal to the next because that is what everyone around you is doing. You follow the path that seems normal. Study hard, build a career, earn money, take care of family, try to succeed. At that time, it all feels natural. You rarely stop to question the direction because there is always something urgent in front of you. Deadlines, expectations, pressure to prove yourself. Your mind becomes used to running. Years pass in this constant movement. You tell yourself you will think deeply about your life later, when things slow down. But for a long time, life does not slow down. It keeps pulling you forward. And without noticing, 20 or 30 years can disappear inside routines. This is why many people do not develop deep awareness in their early years. Not because they are incapable, but because they are too busy surviving and performing. Real awareness needs space. It needs silence. It needs moments where you step back and look at your life honestly. For many people, that space finally appears after 50. Something begins to shift quietly inside the mind. The things that once felt extremely important start losing their power. The race you were running begins to feel less urgent. You start noticing how much of your energy went into meeting expectations rather than understanding yourself. The praise that once felt exciting does not move you the same way anymore. The approval you worked so hard to earn begins to feel less meaningful. And the goals you chased for years sometimes feel strangely empty when you finally look at them from a distance. This realization can feel confusing at first. You might ask yourself questions you never asked before. Why did I spend so many years chasing this? Did I truly choose this life? Or did I simply follow what was expected? What actually matters to me now? These questions can make people uncomfortable. Some even try to ignore them because they feel unsettling. But in Buddhist wisdom, this discomfort is not a problem. It is the beginning of insight. Discomfort means the mind is starting to wake up. It means you are beginning to see things more clearly than before. For many years, you were living mostly through habit, through routines, through expectations, through social pressure. Now the mind begins to pause and observe. You start noticing patterns in your own life. You see which decisions brought peace and which ones created stress. You understand which relationships truly supported you and which ones slowly drained your energy. This clarity does not come from reading books alone. It comes from living. It comes from experiencing mistakes, disappointments, successes, and unexpected turns. Every challenge you faced added another layer of understanding. Every time life surprised you, it quietly expanded your awareness. That is why awakening later in life can actually be deeper. When you are younger, your understanding of life is mostly theoretical. You imagine how things will feel. You guess what happiness might look like. But after 50, you no longer need to guess. You have seen enough of life to recognize what truly matters. You have seen how quickly success can change. You have seen how fragile plans can be. You have seen that many of the things people fight for are temporary. This kind of knowledge is powerful because it is real. It is not based on ideas. It is based on experience. And when this realization finally settles in your mind, something important happens. You stop believing that it is too late. Instead, you start realizing something surprising. You may actually be more ready now than you ever were before. Your mind is calmer than it used to be. You are less controlled by comparison. You care less about impressing others. You are more honest with yourself about what brings meaning and what does not. This honesty creates a new kind of freedom. For the first time in many years, you begin looking at your life not as something that must follow a script, but as something you can still shape. You realize that the past does not need to trap you. The years you already lived were not wasted. They were preparation. They gave you understanding that younger versions of yourself did not yet have. So instead of thinking you are late, you begin seeing the truth more clearly. You are not late. Oh, you are awake. And once the mind truly wakes up, the door to a new life quietly opens. Stop negotiating with your old self. One of the biggest reasons people struggle to rebuild their life after 50 is something very quiet but very powerful. They keep negotiating with the person they used to be, even when they feel a strong desire to change. A voice from the past keeps interrupting them. It whispers familiar thoughts that sound reasonable at first. It says things like, that this is not who you are. You have always lived this way. People already know you as this person. At your age, starting over does not make sense. These thoughts come from memory. They come from the habits and identities that were built over many years. And because they have been repeated for so long, they begin to feel like truth. But they are not truth. They are simply echoes of an older version of you. In Buddhism, one of the most important insights is that the self is not fixed. The person you were 10 years ago is already gone. The thoughts you believed back then have already changed. Even your personality has shifted many times without you noticing. Yet the mind still clings to old identities as if they are permanent. You may still see yourself as the same employee, the same parent, the same personality, the same person who made certain mistakes long ago. The mind keeps replaying those definitions, and slowly they become invisible walls. And this is where the negotiation begins. You start telling yourself things like, I want to change, but I have always been this kind of person. I want a different life, but I already invested too much time in the old one. I want to follow my real interests, but people expect something else from me. Each of these thoughts sounds logical, but if you look closely, they all have the same message. Stay the same. Stay predictable. But stay loyal to the version of yourself that the world already recognizes. This is how the mind protects what is familiar. Even if the familiar life is not fulfilling, the mind still prefers it because it feels safe. Change introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty makes the mind uncomfortable. So instead of moving forward, many people keep negotiating with their past identity. They keep asking permission from who they used to be. They measure every new idea against the old story they have about themselves. But the past cannot give you permission for the future. The past only knows what has already happened. It does not know what you are capable of becoming. When you constantly consult your past identity, you trap yourself inside it. You begin believing that your personality is permanent, that your habits cannot change, that your path is already decided. But this belief is exactly what Buddhism challenges. The Buddha taught that life is a process of continuous change. Every moment, thoughts arise and pass away, emotions appear and disappear. Even your beliefs shift as you gain new experiences. You are not a statue carved from stone. You are more like a river that is always moving. The problem is that many people stop flowing. They freeze their identity around certain roles and stories. They say, that I am the serious one. I am the responsible one. I am the person who cannot do that. I am too old to learn something new. These statements sound small, but they quietly shape your entire life. The moment you believe them, you begin acting according to them. You stop exploring new directions because they do not match the image you built in the past. But rebuilding your life requires something very simple and very brave. You stop asking your past identity for approval. Did you stop measuring your future through the lens of who you used to be? Instead of saying, "This is who I have always been," you begin asking a more powerful question. Who do I want to become now? This shift changes everything, because the moment you stop defending your old identity, you create space for a new one. Maybe you discover interests you ignored for decades. Maybe you realize that certain habits no longer reflect who you truly are. Maybe you start noticing possibilities that were invisible before. This does not mean rejecting your past completely. Your past experiences still carry wisdom. They taught you lessons about life, about people, about yourself. But your past should guide you, not control you. There is a difference between learning from your history and being imprisoned by it. Many people believe that starting again means they must erase everything they were before. But that is not necessary. Rebuilding your life simply means you stop being loyal to patterns that no longer serve you. You stop repeating behaviors just because they are familiar. You allow yourself to evolve. And evolution is natural. Look at nature. Trees grow in new directions when sunlight shifts. Rivers change their course when obstacles appear. Seasons transform the landscape again and again. Change is not abnormal. It is life itself. The only place where change often stops is inside the human mind, because the mind becomes attached to its old stories. So when you feel the desire to rebuild your life, do not immediately ask whether it fits the person you used to be. That person already lived their chapter. The real question is much simpler. Does this path feel honest to who you are becoming now? When you stop negotiating with your past identity, a surprising amount of energy returns. The hesitation fades. The fear begins to loosen, and slowly you realize something powerful. and you are not trapped by the person you used to be. You are free to grow beyond them. Your regret is not a verdict, it is a compass. One feeling that becomes stronger as people grow older is regret. When you are young, life moves too quickly to look back for very long. You are focused on the next step, the next goal, the next responsibility. Even when mistakes happen, you often move forward before fully understanding them. But later in life, the mind becomes quieter. You begin to look back over the years with more honesty. Certain memories return, certain decisions appear more clearly than they did before, and suddenly you start noticing moments where life could have gone in a different direction. You might remember opportunities you ignored because you were afraid. Relationships where you stayed silent when you should have spoken. Dreams you postponed because you believed there would always be more time. This is when regret appears. For many people, regret feels like a heavy weight. It feels like a judgment against the life they lived. The mind begins saying things like, "I should have done this differently. I wasted too many years. It is too late to change anything now." These thoughts can feel painful because they carry a sense of finality. They make it seem as if your past decisions have already decided the rest of your life. But Buddhist wisdom teaches something very different. Regret is not a verdict. It is a signal. It is the mind waking up and recognizing where life moved away from your deeper truth. When you look at regret in this way, it stops being an enemy. Instead, it becomes a teacher. Think about what regret really is. It is not simply sadness about the past. It is clarity that arrived later. It is the moment when your understanding of life becomes deeper than it was before. When you made certain decisions years ago, you were operating with the awareness you had at that time. Your choices were shaped by fear, expectations, responsibilities, and the knowledge available to you in that moment. Now, after years of experience, you can see things more clearly. You understand yourself better. You recognize what truly matters to you. And from this new perspective, certain past decisions suddenly look different. That difference in understanding creates regret. But that regret does not mean your life is ruined. It means your awareness has grown. In Buddhism, that growth often begins with recognizing where we were unconscious. It begins with seeing where attachment, fear, or confusion influenced our decisions. This recognition can feel uncomfortable at first, but it is also extremely valuable, because regret points directly toward your deepest values. When you regret something, it usually reveals something important about your heart. It shows you what matters to you more than you realized before. For example, that someone may regret spending too many years chasing success while neglecting meaningful relationships. That regret reveals that connection and love are more important to them than status. Another person may regret staying silent for too long in situations where they should have followed their truth. That regret reveals how deeply they value authenticity. In this way, regret acts like a compass. A compass does not punish you for being off course. It simply shows you where north is. Regret works the same way. It quietly points toward the direction your life wants to move now. The problem is that many people misunderstand this signal. Instead of using regret as guidance, they turn it into self-punishment. They replay their past again and again, criticizing themselves for what they did or did not do. They carry shame for years, believing they cannot move forward because the past cannot be changed. But the purpose of regret is not to trap you in guilt. Its purpose is to wake you up. Once the message of regret is understood, its job is complete. Imagine touching a hot surface. The pain tells you to move your hand away. The pain is useful for a moment because it protects you from harm. But once you move your hand, the pain does not need to continue forever. Regret works in a similar way. It shows you something important. Once you understand the lesson, you can release the suffering that comes with it. The real tragedy is not that people made mistakes in the past. The real tragedy is when they refuse to learn from those mistakes. Many people reach 50 or 60 and still carry the same patterns that created regret in the first place. They repeat the same fears, the same compromises, the same avoidance of their deeper truth. But rebuilding your life after 50 means something different. It means using your regret as information. It means looking honestly at your past without becoming trapped inside it. When you do this with courage, regret becomes incredibly powerful. It begins showing you what you truly want your remaining years to represent. It reveals the parts of your life that deserve more attention now. Maybe you realize that your health deserves more care. Maybe you realize that your creativity was ignored for too long. Maybe you realize that certain relationships need honesty instead of silence. Der regret does not demand perfection. It simply invites your awareness, and awareness creates freedom. Because once you see clearly what matters, you can begin living differently from this moment forward. You cannot change the past, but you can change how you move from here. In Buddhism, every moment is considered a new beginning. Each breath offers the chance to choose awareness instead of unconscious habit. Your past mistakes do not disappear, but they stop controlling your direction. Instead, they become part of your wisdom. They remind you of what you no longer want to repeat. They remind you of the courage you wish you had shown earlier. And now, that courage can appear. So instead of looking at regret as evidence that you failed, look at it as proof that your mind has grown. It means you can now see the difference between the life you lived and the life your heart was quietly asking for. That difference is not meant to break you. It is meant to guide you. Because the moment regret turns into understanding, it stops being a burden. It becomes a compass pointing toward the life you still have time to build. Detachment is not coldness. It is strength. Many people misunderstand the word detachment. When they hear it, they imagine someone who has stopped caring about life, someone distant, emotionless, disconnected from people and experiences. It can sound like a cold way of living, as if detachment means pushing everything away and becoming numb. But that is not what detachment means in Buddhism. Detachment is not the absence of love. It is the absence of chains. It does not mean you stop caring about people, dreams, or experiences. It means you stop holding them so tightly that your peace depends on them staying exactly the way you want. Most suffering in life does not come from events themselves. It comes from our attachment to how we believe those events should unfold. We create expectations about relationships, about success, and about how life is supposed to look at a certain age. We imagine the future in very specific ways, and then we cling to those images. But life is always changing. People change. Plans change. Circumstances shift in ways we never expected. Health can change. Opportunities can appear or disappear, and relationships can move in directions we did not predict. When the mind is strongly attached to a certain outcome, every change feels like a threat. But you may have experienced this many times in your life. Perhaps a job you believed would last forever suddenly ended. Perhaps a relationship you trusted completely changed over time. Perhaps plans you spent years preparing simply did not unfold the way you imagined. If your peace depends entirely on those things remaining stable, their change can feel devastating. This is why Buddhism places so much importance on detachment. Detachment is the ability to care deeply while still understanding that everything in life is temporary. It allows you to love people without trying to control them. It allows you to work toward goals without believing your worth depends on achieving them. It allows you to appreciate moments without demanding that they last forever. In simple words, detachment means holding life gently instead of gripping it tightly, and this becomes especially important after 50. By this stage of life, that most people have already experienced enough change to understand that nothing remains fixed. You have seen how quickly situations can transform. You have seen how plans can shift and how people can evolve in unexpected ways. These experiences can create two different reactions. Some people become bitter and fearful. They begin clinging even more tightly to whatever stability remains because they are afraid of losing it. But others begin developing detachment. They realize that trying to control every outcome only creates more stress. They begin learning how to move with life instead of constantly resisting it. This does not make them weak. In fact, it makes them incredibly strong. Detachment creates emotional stability. When you are detached, you are not constantly shaken by every change around you. You can face uncertainty without panic. You can experience disappointment without collapsing. But you can release what no longer belongs in your life without feeling like you have lost yourself. Think about how much energy people spend trying to force life to behave in certain ways. They try to force relationships to remain the same. They try to force careers to follow a specific path. They try to force time itself to slow down. But none of these things can be controlled completely. The more tightly we try to hold them, the more tension we create inside ourselves. Detachment removes that tension. It allows you to participate fully in life without becoming imprisoned by it. For example, you can pursue meaningful work while understanding that success and failure are both possible. If success comes, you appreciate it without becoming arrogant. If failure comes, you learn from it without believing your life is over. You can love someone deeply while understanding that people grow and change. You enjoy the connection while it exists. And if circumstances shift, you allow the relationship to evolve rather than trying to freeze it in time. This mindset creates a calm strength that is very difficult to break. It also makes rebuilding your life much easier. When you are strongly attached to how things used to be, moving forward feels impossible. You keep comparing your present situation to the past. You keep wishing that certain people, opportunities, or conditions would return. But detachment frees you from that constant comparison. Instead of asking why things did not stay the same, you begin asking what life is inviting you to learn now. Instead of clinging to what ended, you become curious about what might begin. This shift opens the door to reinvention. After 50, many of the identities you built earlier in life begin to change. Careers may shift, children may grow independent, social roles may transform, certain ambitions may no longer feel meaningful. If you cling tightly to the old versions of these identities, the transition becomes painful. But if you practice detachment, you can move through these changes with dignity and flexibility. You recognize that your worth was never limited to one role. You understand that your life still holds possibilities beyond the identities you once carried. Detachment also brings a deeper form of peace. When you stop trying to control everything around you, your mind becomes quieter. Or you stop reacting to every small disturbance. You begin accepting life as it unfolds, rather than constantly fighting against it. This does not mean you become passive. You still make choices. You still take action. You still build and create and explore. But you do it with a lighter heart. Your happiness no longer depends on everything going exactly the way you imagined. And this inner freedom is one of the greatest strengths a person can develop. It allows you to rebuild your life without carrying the heavy weight of the past. It allows you to move toward new possibilities without fear of losing control. Instead of feeling fragile when life changes, you feel adaptable. Instead of resisting every shift, you move with it. Detachment is not coldness. It is emotional maturity. It is the ability to stay open to life while understanding its impermanent nature. And when you learn this kind of strength, rebuilding your life after 50 becomes less about forcing a new future and more about flowing naturally into the next chapter of your journey. The real reinvention happens inside the mind. Many people believe that rebuilding their life means changing their outer circumstances. They imagine that reinvention requires something big and visible, a different career, a new home, a new relationship, a completely different lifestyle. And sometimes these changes can be helpful. Sometimes a new environment truly does support a new chapter. But Buddhist wisdom reminds us of something deeper. The most important transformation never begins outside. It begins inside the mind. If the mind remains the same, even the biggest external changes will eventually recreate the same struggles. A person may move to a new city, but still carry the same fears. They may change their job, but still feel the same stress. They may start a new relationship, but still react with the same patterns of insecurity or expectation. The environment changes, but the mind continues repeating the same habits. This is why real reinvention must begin with awareness of the mind itself. The mind is where every experience begins. It is where thoughts appear, where emotions grow, where reactions are formed. Long before something becomes an action in the outside world, it begins as a pattern inside the mind. Most of these patterns are automatic. Over the years, the mind learns certain ways of reacting to life. When something uncomfortable happens, it may immediately produce anxiety. When someone criticizes you, it may immediately produce anger or defensiveness. When you compare your life to someone else's, it may produce feelings of disappointment or inadequacy. These reactions can become so familiar that we stop noticing them. They feel like part of who we are. But Buddhism teaches that these mental patterns are not permanent. They are habits that formed through repetition. And anything that forms through repetition can slowly change through awareness. This is where the real process of reinvention begins, not by forcing yourself to become someone new overnight, but by gradually understanding how your mind works. When you begin observing your thoughts carefully, you start seeing something interesting. Many of the thoughts that shape your life are not even chosen consciously. They appear automatically because they have been practiced for years. A thought appears telling you that you are too old to start something new. Another thought says you are not talented enough. Another thought reminds you of past failures and quietly suggests that trying again will lead to the same result. If you believe every thought that appears, your life becomes controlled by old mental habits. But when you observe those thoughts, instead of automatically believing them, something changes. You create space between the thought and your response. In that space, awareness grows. Instead of reacting immediately, you begin questioning the story your mind is telling. Is this thought actually true? Or is it simply familiar? Is this fear protecting me? Or is it limiting me? Is this belief based on reality, or is it based on something I learned years ago that may no longer apply? These questions slowly loosen the control of old mental patterns. Over time, you begin realizing that many of the limits you believed in were never absolute. They were interpretations created by the mind. And once you see that clearly, the mind begins opening to new possibilities. This process does not happen instantly. It happens in ordinary moments. It happens when frustration appears and you pause instead of reacting immediately. It happens when doubt appears and you observe it instead of letting it control your decisions. It happens when comparison appears and you gently return your attention to your own path. Each of these small moments strengthens awareness, and awareness is the foundation of inner reinvention. Another important part of this process is understanding how the mind attaches meaning to events. Two people can experience the same situation and feel completely different emotions. One person may see a challenge as proof that they are failing. Another person may see the same challenge as an opportunity to learn. The event is the same. The interpretation is different. This means your experience of life is shaped not only by what happens, but by how the mind interprets what happens. When you begin working with the mind, you begin changing these interpretations. A mistake becomes a lesson instead of a failure. A delay becomes preparation instead of punishment. A new beginning becomes an opportunity instead of a risk. This shift in perspective transforms the way you experience life. You no longer feel trapped by circumstances because your mind becomes more flexible. You begin understanding that while you cannot control every situation, you can influence how your mind responds to those situations. This realization is deeply empowering. It means that even if external changes take time, your inner life can begin transforming immediately. You can start developing patience where there was once impatience. You can develop calm where there was once anxiety. You can develop clarity where there was once confusion. These inner changes may not always be visible to others, but they quietly reshape your entire life. The way you speak changes. The way you listen changes. The way you make decisions changes. Even your energy begins to feel different because you are no longer reacting automatically to every thought or emotion that appears. This inner stability becomes extremely valuable when rebuilding your life after 50. At this stage, many people realize that chasing endless external achievements did not always bring the peace they expected. They begin searching for something deeper: inner balance, inner clarity, inner freedom. These qualities cannot be purchased or achieved through status. They grow through awareness of the mind, and once the mind begins changing, external changes become easier. You become more confident in your decisions because they are no longer driven by fear. You become more patient with the process of growth because you understand that transformation takes time. You also become less dependent on external validation. Instead of asking whether others approve of your choices, you begin asking whether your choices bring peace and meaning to your life. This shift is incredibly powerful because once your inner world becomes stable, your outer world begins reflecting that stability. Your relationships improve because you react with more understanding. Your work improves because you approach it with clearer intention. Your daily life becomes calmer because your mind is no longer constantly pulled in different directions. This is the real meaning of reinvention. Not just a new lifestyle, a new relationship with your own mind. When the mind becomes aware, flexible, and compassionate toward itself, your life naturally begins to change. And the most beautiful part of this process is that it can begin at any age, even after 50. In fact, many people discover that this stage of life gives them the maturity and patience needed to truly understand their mind for the first time. And once that understanding begins, a completely new way of living slowly unfolds. Simplicity becomes a powerful advantage. For many years, life often feels like a race toward more success. No life, the more successful you appear. A life, the more successful you appear. A bigger career, a busier schedule, a larger network, more commitments, more goals. At first, this kind of life can feel exciting. It feels like progress. It feels like you are moving forward and building something important. But as time passes, many people begin to notice something surprising. The more things they add to their life, the more complicated everything becomes. Responsibilities multiply, schedules become crowded. There is always another obligation, another task, another expectation waiting to be fulfilled. Life begins to feel full, but not always meaningful. By the time someone reaches 50, they often carry decades of accumulated complexity. There are responsibilities connected to family, career, finances, social expectations, and personal habits that have been repeated for years. All of these things slowly fill the space of life until it begins to feel overwhelming. This is where an important realization often appears. More does not always mean better. Many people begin to notice that the things they once believed would bring happiness did not actually bring the peace they expected. Some achievements may have brought pride for a moment, but the feeling did not last. Some possessions that once seemed important eventually became ordinary. Buddhist wisdom has always recognized this pattern. It teaches that the mind easily becomes trapped in the pursuit of more, believing that fulfillment exists somewhere just beyond the next achievement. But this constant pursuit rarely leads to lasting peace. Peace begins to appear when life becomes simpler. Simplicity is not about having nothing. It is about having what truly matters and letting go of what does not. After 50, simplicity can become one of the greatest advantages a person has. By this stage of life, you have already experienced enough to know which parts of life are meaningful and which parts were simply noise. You have seen how much time and energy certain distractions consume. You have felt how exhausting it can be to maintain a life that is too crowded. Because of this awareness, you begin valuing things differently. Instead of chasing every opportunity, you start choosing carefully. Instead of filling every hour with activity, you begin appreciating moments of quiet. Instead of surrounding yourself with endless social interactions, you begin valuing deeper connections with fewer people. This shift towards simplicity is not a loss. It is a form of refinement. Think about how nature works. A clear sky feels peaceful because it is not crowded with storms. A calm lake feels beautiful because it is not constantly disturbed. In the same way, the human mind becomes clearer when life is not overloaded with unnecessary demands. When life becomes simpler, your attention returns to the present moment. You begin noticing small things that once went unnoticed. The calm of an early morning, the comfort of a meaningful conversation, the quiet satisfaction of completing a task without rushing. These simple experiences begin to carry more value than constant excitement. Simplicity also gives you something extremely valuable: time. Earlier in life, time often feels like something that disappears quickly. Days are filled with obligations, leaving very little space for reflection. But when you simplify your life, time begins to open again. You gain the ability to think clearly about your direction. You gain space to explore interests that may have been ignored for years. You gain the freedom to focus on things that nourish your mind and spirit, instead of constantly reacting to external pressure. And this freedom becomes especially powerful when rebuilding your life after 50. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by too many choices, simplicity helps you focus on what truly matters now. Maybe it means dedicating more attention to your health. Maybe it means rediscovering creativity that was buried under responsibilities. Maybe it means strengthening relationships that bring genuine warmth to your life. But simplicity allows these important areas to grow because your energy is no longer scattered everywhere. Another benefit of simplicity is clarity. When life is crowded with distractions, it becomes difficult to hear your own inner voice. Your mind is constantly reacting to emails, messages, expectations, and comparisons with others. But when life becomes simpler, your mind becomes quieter. And in that quiet space, clarity appears. You begin understanding yourself better. You start recognizing what genuinely brings fulfillment and what simply kept you busy. You realize that many pressures you carried for years were not actually necessary. This clarity can feel liberating. You begin realizing that happiness was never hidden inside complicated achievements. Often, it was hidden inside the simple moments you overlooked while chasing something larger. Simplicity also strengthens resilience. When life depends on many complicated structures, the even small disruptions can feel overwhelming. But when life is built on simple foundations, you adapt more easily when things change. A simple life requires less constant maintenance. It gives you flexibility when circumstances shift. It allows you to move forward without feeling trapped by too many obligations. This flexibility is especially valuable later in life because it gives you the ability to redesign your path without carrying unnecessary weight from the past. Simplicity does not mean withdrawing from life. It means engaging with life more intentionally. You still pursue meaningful work. You still maintain relationships. You still explore and grow. But instead of doing everything, you focus on doing the right things. This focus brings a quiet strength to your life. Your days begin to feel more purposeful. Your energy becomes more stable. Your mind becomes less scattered and more present. Over time, this kind of life begins to feel deeply satisfying, not because it is filled with constant excitement, but because it is aligned with what truly matters. After 50, simplicity becomes a powerful advantage because it helps you see life clearly. You are no longer distracted by the endless pursuit of more. Instead, you begin building a life that is calm, meaningful, and deeply authentic. And in that calm space, the process of rebuilding your life becomes much easier. Because when your path is simple, your direction becomes clear. Fear of judgment loses its power. For a large part of life, many people live under a quiet pressure that they rarely talk about openly. The pressure of being judged. From a young age, we are taught to care deeply about what others think. Parents, teachers, friends, colleagues, and society all send signals about what is acceptable and what is not. Slowly, without realizing it, the mind begins shaping itself around these expectations. You learn which behaviors receive approval and which ones attract criticism. You learn which dreams sound respectable and which ones might make people question you. Over time, this awareness becomes part of how you make decisions. Instead of asking what truly feels right, many people begin asking a different question. What will people think? This question can quietly control an entire life. Someone may stay in a career they no longer enjoy because leaving would confuse others. Someone may avoid expressing their real opinions because they fear disagreement. Someone may abandon a personal dream because they believe others will consider it unrealistic or strange. These choices may seem small at first, but over many years they shape the direction of a person's life. The desire for approval becomes a powerful force. In Buddhist teachings, this attachment to approval is one of the subtle ways the ego maintains control. The mind wants to be accepted, admired, and respected. When approval comes, it feels rewarding. When criticism appears, it can feel painful. But the problem is that approval is unstable. People's opinions change constantly. Someone who supports your choices today may disagree with them tomorrow. Someone who praises you for one action may criticize you for another. Trying to satisfy every opinion is like trying to control the weather. It is impossible. Yet many people spend decades attempting exactly that. They carefully shape their lives to fit what seems socially acceptable. They avoid risks that might lead to criticism. They hide parts of themselves that feel different from the expectations around them. This constant adjustment can become exhausting. By the time someone reaches 50, many have lived long enough to start noticing something important. The approval they worked so hard to earn did not bring the peace they expected. Even when people praise your success, the satisfaction does not last forever. Soon another expectation appears, another standard to meet, another comparison to manage. This realization can be eye-opening. You begin recognizing how much energy was spent trying to maintain an image rather than living authentically. You see how often decisions were shaped by fear of judgment instead of clarity of purpose. At first, this realization can feel uncomfortable, but slowly, something liberating begins to happen. The power of other people's opinions starts weakening. With time and experience, you begin understanding that everyone is navigating their own challenges. Most people are far more focused on their own lives than on judging yours. The harsh judgments you once feared often exist mostly in your imagination. And even when people do judge, their opinions rarely have the lasting power we assume they will. Life continues moving forward regardless. This awareness creates a new kind of freedom. You start realizing that it is impossible to live honestly while trying to satisfy every observer. No matter what path you choose, someone will disagree with it. Some people may think you are too cautious. Others may think you are too bold. Some may believe you are changing too much. Others may believe you are not changing enough. Because opinions vary so widely, trying to please everyone becomes an endless and exhausting task. After 50, many people finally begin releasing this burden. They understand that their time and energy are too valuable to spend constantly performing for an invisible audience. Instead of asking what others will think, they begin asking deeper questions. Does this decision bring meaning to my life? Does this direction align with my values? Does this choice help me live with peace and honesty? These questions shift the focus from external approval to internal clarity. And when decisions begin coming from clarity rather than fear, something powerful happens. Courage grows naturally. You may find the courage to explore interests that once felt unrealistic. Or you may feel ready to speak more honestly in situations where you previously remained silent. You may start shaping your daily life according to what genuinely matters to you, instead of what appears impressive to others. This does not mean becoming careless or disrespectful of other people's perspectives. It simply means that their opinions no longer control your direction. You listen when advice is wise. You consider different viewpoints when they are helpful. But your identity and choices are no longer built around gaining approval. This shift creates a deep sense of relief. When fear of judgment fades, the mind becomes lighter. You no longer spend so much time rehearsing how others might react to your choices. You no longer feel trapped by expectations that no longer reflect who you are. Instead, your energy returns to something far more meaningful: living honestly. Buddhism encourages this kind of honesty because it allows a person to live with integrity rather than constant comparison. When you stop measuring your life against other people's standards, you gain the freedom to walk your own path. After 50, this freedom can feel especially powerful. You have lived long enough to know that time is precious. The years ahead deserve to be spent with intention, not constant hesitation. And when fear of judgment loses its power, the door opens to a more authentic life. A life where your choices are guided not by the voices around you, but by the quiet wisdom that has been growing inside you all along. Choose one direction and commit to it. One of the greatest misunderstandings about life after 50 is the belief that your age is a limitation. Society often sends a quiet message that after a certain point, the most important chapters of life are already finished. People begin speaking about the past more than the future. They talk about what someone used to be instead of what they might still become. But this belief ignores something very important. Age does not only bring years, it brings understanding. When you are younger, life is often guided by energy. You have strength, ambition, and the desire to move quickly toward success. These qualities are valuable, but they can also create impatience. But life rarely moves that way. Over time, 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 over time. But life rarely moves that way. Over time, experience begins teaching lessons that cannot be learned from books or advice alone. You start seeing how temporary many things really are. Situations that once seemed permanent eventually change, but the achievements that once felt extremely important slowly become ordinary memories. Even the challenges that once felt overwhelming eventually pass. These experiences shape a deeper understanding of life. You begin noticing patterns that were invisible when you were younger. You understand how emotions rise and fall. You recognize how fear can distort decisions. You see how often people chase things that do not actually bring lasting peace. This understanding is something that only time can provide. By the time someone reaches 50 or beyond, they carry decades of lived experience. They have seen different sides of life. They have faced both success and disappointment. They have learned which problems truly matter and which ones disappear with time. This kind of perspective becomes extremely valuable. It allows you to make decisions more calmly. Instead of reacting quickly to every challenge, you pause and observe. Instead of chasing every opportunity, you choose carefully. You understand that not every path needs to be followed. This clarity is a powerful advantage. It means your reinvention does not need to be chaotic or desperate. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. Your next chapter can be guided by wisdom rather than pressure. Many younger people are still trying to discover who they are. They are experimenting with different roles, testing different identities, and learning from mistakes. By contrast, you already know much more about yourself. You understand what kind of work drains your energy and what kind of work feels meaningful. You understand what kind of relationships bring peace and which ones create unnecessary stress. You know which environments inspire you and which ones make you feel trapped. This knowledge makes your decisions more precise. Instead of wandering through endless possibilities, then you can focus on the directions that genuinely align with your values. Another advantage that often appears with age is emotional stability. When you are younger, emotions can feel overwhelming. A single failure may feel like the end of the world. A small criticism may feel deeply personal. But after years of experience, emotions begin losing some of their power to control you. You have already survived difficult moments before. You know that disappointment is temporary. You know that life continues moving forward, even after unexpected setbacks. This emotional resilience becomes a strong foundation for rebuilding your life. Instead of being afraid of failure, you see it as part of growth. Instead of avoiding challenges completely, you approach them with patience. You are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are simply living your truth. Age also brings a new relationship with time. Earlier in life, time can feel endless. People assume there will always be another chance to pursue what matters. Because of this belief, many dreams are postponed again and again. But later in life, time becomes more visible. You become aware that each year carries value. Each day becomes an opportunity rather than something to be wasted. This awareness sharpens your priorities. You stop spending energy on things that do not matter. You become more intentional about how you use your time. You focus on experiences that bring depth rather than constant distraction. This clarity allows you to design a life that feels more authentic. Instead of following habits created years ago, you begin asking what truly deserves your attention now. Sometimes this leads people to rediscover passions they abandoned earlier in life. Sometimes it leads them to change the pace of their work. Sometimes it leads them to focus more deeply on personal growth or meaningful connections. Whatever direction it takes, the motivation comes from a place of understanding rather than pressure. And this is what makes reinvention after 50 so powerful. You are not starting from confusion. You are starting from wisdom. The lessons you learned from the past become tools for the future. The mistakes you once regretted become guides for better decisions. The challenges you survived become proof of your resilience. Instead of feeling like you are beginning again from nothing, you begin again with knowledge. This changes the entire experience of rebuilding your life. You no longer chase success simply to impress others. You pursue what feels meaningful to you. You no longer rush through life trying to keep up with everyone else. You move at a pace that allows you to remain present and thoughtful. Your path becomes calmer, but also more intentional. And because of that, it often becomes more fulfilling. Oh, the truth is that your later years do not have to become smaller. They can become deeper. Instead of focusing on endless expansion, you begin focusing on depth of experience, clarity of purpose, and peace of mind. This is why many spiritual traditions describe the later stages of life as a time of awakening rather than decline. You finally see life with fewer illusions. You finally understand what deserves your attention and what does not. And with that understanding, you can begin shaping the years ahead with wisdom, patience, and authenticity. Your age is not a barrier. It is one of your greatest strengths. Because while youth may have energy, age carries understanding. And understanding has the power to transform the rest of your life. Your environment shapes your future. One of the quiet truths about rebuilding your life is that change rarely happens in isolation. Many people believe that transformation is purely a matter of personal willpower, and they think that if they simply decide to change, everything else will follow naturally. But life is more complex than that. Your environment plays a powerful role in shaping your thoughts, your habits, and even your identity. Every day you are surrounded by influences that slowly shape how you see the world. The conversations you hear, the attitudes of the people around you, the routines you repeat, and even the places you spend time in all affect the direction of your mind. At first, this influence can be difficult to notice because it feels normal. If you spend years in the same environment, it becomes familiar. The way people speak, the way they think, the way they react to life all begin to feel like the natural way things are. But familiarity is not always healthy. Sometimes the environment we grow used to quietly limits our growth. For example, imagine spending years around people who constantly complain about life, but rarely take action to improve it. After hearing that attitude every day, the mind begins absorbing the same patterns. Slowly you may start believing that change is impossible, that life is unfair, or that trying something new is pointless. The environment shapes your expectations. The same thing can happen with fear. If you are surrounded by people who avoid risk and discourage new ideas, you may begin doubting your own ambitions, even if you feel a desire to explore something different. Their hesitation may make you question yourself. This is not because they want to harm you. Most of the time, people simply share the mindset they have developed from their own experiences. But if you want to rebuild your life, it becomes important to recognize how these influences affect you. Buddhist teachings often emphasize that the mind is deeply connected to its surroundings. The conditions around you create the mental atmosphere in which your thoughts grow. Just like a plant depends on the quality of soil and sunlight, the mind depends on the environment that surrounds it. If the soil is unhealthy, growth becomes difficult. If the environment supports clarity and calm, growth becomes much easier. This does not always mean you must leave your entire life behind. Sometimes people misunderstand this idea and believe that rebuilding themselves requires escaping everything familiar. But the deeper meaning is about awareness. It means paying attention to the influences that shape your daily thinking. It means noticing which conversations uplift your mind and which ones drain it. It means recognizing which habits bring clarity and which ones create confusion. Once you begin observing these patterns, you gain the power to make small but meaningful changes. For example, you may decide to spend less time in conversations that revolve around constant negativity. Instead of participating in discussions that only focus on problems, you may seek conversations that encourage reflection and growth. You may start choosing activities that bring peace to your mind, rather than constant distraction. This could be reading thoughtful material, spending time in nature, or engaging in creative work that allows your thoughts to slow down. Even the physical spaces you spend time in can influence your mental state. A cluttered, noisy environment can make the mind restless, while a calm and organized space can help your thoughts become clearer. These changes may seem small, but they slowly transform the conditions in which your mind operates. Over time, these new conditions begin supporting the person you are becoming. You start noticing that certain ideas feel easier to pursue when your environment encourages them. New habits become easier to maintain when your surroundings do not constantly pull you back toward old patterns. Another important part of environment is the people you spend time with. Human beings naturally reflect the attitudes and behaviors of those around them. If you spend time with people who are thoughtful, curious, and open to growth, those qualities begin appearing in your own life. Their way of thinking influences your own perspective. But if you constantly interact with people who resist change, your own desire for growth may begin weakening. This does not mean you must judge others or push them away harshly. Instead, it means you become more conscious about balance. You still respect your relationships, but you also make space for influences that support the direction you want your life to take. Sometimes this simply means adding new voices into your life. Listening to teachers who inspire wisdom, to reading books that challenge your perspective, engaging with communities that encourage personal development. These influences create a new mental atmosphere, and inside that atmosphere, your reinvention begins growing naturally. Over time, something interesting happens. The new environment begins strengthening your confidence. Instead of constantly fighting against old habits, you feel supported by the conditions around you. Your thoughts become clearer, and your decisions feel more aligned with your values. This makes rebuilding your life feel less like a struggle and more like a natural evolution. You begin realizing that personal growth is not only about inner effort, it is also about creating conditions where growth can flourish. Just as a seed grows best in healthy soil, your new life grows best in an environment that nourishes clarity, calmness, and courage. When you become aware of this connection between environment and mind, you gain an important advantage. You stop expecting yourself to change while remaining surrounded by influences that resist change. Instead, you begin shaping your surroundings in ways that support the person you want to become. And once your environment begins aligning with your intentions, the process of rebuilding your life becomes much more powerful and sustainable. Your transformation is no longer something you must force every day. It becomes something that grows naturally from the conditions you have created. Your age is not a limitation. It is an advantage. There is a quiet truth about life that many people only understand later. A person can live for many years and still feel like they were never truly living their own life. They followed expectations. They fulfilled responsibilities. They did what seemed right, according to society, family, or tradition. From the outside, everything may have looked stable and respectable. But inside, something may have always felt slightly unfinished. A quiet voice that occasionally asked, "Is this really my path?" Most people ignore that voice for a long time, not because they want to ignore it, but because life becomes busy. Responsibilities fill every hour. There are bills to pay, people to support, expectations to meet. In the middle of all this movement, it becomes easy to postpone deeper questions. Years pass while you focus on doing what needs to be done. But eventually, a moment arrives where life slows just enough for reflection. You begin looking back at the years behind you. You see the choices you made, the paths you followed, the sacrifices you accepted, and somewhere in that reflection, you may realize that some parts of your life were shaped more by obligation than by genuine desire. This realization can feel uncomfortable. Some people respond to it with regret, and others respond with frustration. They may feel that too much time has already passed to make meaningful changes. But Buddhist wisdom encourages a different way of seeing this moment. Instead of treating it as evidence that something is over, it can be understood as the beginning of something new, because awareness itself is powerful. The moment you clearly recognize what has been missing in your life is the moment you gain the ability to move in a new direction. This is why the later stages of life are often described as an opportunity for deeper authenticity. Earlier in life, identity is often built through roles. You become a professional, a parent, a provider, a partner. These roles shape your daily actions and influence how others see you. While these roles can carry meaning, they can also hide your deeper identity. You become so focused on performing your role well that you rarely ask who you are outside of it. But over time, the roles naturally begin to shift. Children grow independent. Careers evolve or come to an end. Social expectations loosen. These changes create space that did not exist before. At first, that space can feel strange. For many years, your schedule and identity were tied to responsibilities. When those structures begin changing, you may feel uncertain about what comes next. Yet this uncertainty carries a hidden gift. It creates room for discovery. Then, without the constant pressure to maintain the same roles, you can begin asking questions that were once buried under responsibility. What kind of life feels meaningful to me now? What activities make me feel alive? What values do I want to guide the years ahead? These questions invite you to reconnect with parts of yourself that may have been quiet for a long time. Perhaps there were interests you once enjoyed but abandoned due to practical concerns. And perhaps there were ideas you wanted to explore but never felt ready to pursue. The later stages of life allow those possibilities to reappear, not as unrealistic fantasies, but as genuine directions worth considering. This stage of life also brings a unique form of clarity. When you are younger, the mind is often crowded with comparisons. You measure your progress against others. You worry about falling behind or appearing unsuccessful. These comparisons can create pressure that pushes you toward goals that are not truly your own. But with time, this pressure often weakens. You begin realizing that every person's life follows a different rhythm. What worked for someone else may not be meaningful for you. What others admire may not actually bring fulfillment. This understanding allows you to focus less on comparison and more on alignment. Instead of asking how your life looks from the outside, you begin asking how it feels from the inside. Does your daily routine bring a sense of calm? Do your activities reflect your values? Do your relationships support mutual respect and understanding? These questions shift your attention from external appearance to internal truth. And this shift opens the door to authentic living. Authenticity does not require dramatic changes overnight. Often it begins with small adjustments that gradually reshape your life. Well, you may begin spending more time on activities that nourish your mind and less time on those that drain your energy. You may simplify certain parts of your life to create more room for reflection and creativity. You may choose honesty in conversations where you previously remained silent. Each of these choices moves you closer to a life that feels genuine rather than performed. Over time, these changes build a new foundation. Your life becomes less about maintaining an image and more about expressing your true values. This transformation is quiet, but powerful. You begin waking up each day with a clearer sense of purpose. Your actions feel more connected to what truly matters to you. Instead of constantly chasing approval or recognition, you find satisfaction in living according to your principles. This kind of life often feels calmer, yet deeper. There is less unnecessary noise, less pressure to compete, and less concern about how others interpret your choices. In its place, there is space for reflection, learning, and meaningful connection. And perhaps most importantly, there is peace in knowing that the life you are living now reflects who you truly are. The years ahead are no longer shaped by habit alone. They are shaped by conscious intention. This is why rebuilding your life after 50 can become one of the most meaningful journeys a person experiences. It is not simply about starting again. It is about finally living with awareness. And when life is guided by awareness instead of expectation, every year becomes an opportunity to grow deeper, wiser, and more aligned with the truth of who you are. If you have reached this point in your life, and something inside you is asking for change, understand one important truth. That voice is not a problem. It is awareness. Many people spend their entire lives ignoring that voice. They stay busy, they stay distracted, and they keep repeating the same patterns because it feels safer than questioning them. But the moment you begin questioning your life is the moment something powerful has already started. Awareness has entered your mind, and awareness changes everything. You may not rebuild your life overnight. Real change rarely happens that quickly. But once the mind begins to see clearly, it can no longer return to anxious living. You begin noticing what drains your energy. You begin recognizing what truly brings peace. You start understanding which paths are worth following and which ones were never meant for you. This clarity is the beginning of transformation. Remember, rebuilding your life after 50 is not about becoming someone completely different. It is about becoming more honest. It is about letting go of identities that no longer reflect who you are. It is about releasing the pressure to live according to expectations that were never truly yours. And most importantly, it is about choosing to live the years ahead with awareness. The truth is, life does not stop offering new chapters. Every day you wake up is another opportunity to move closer to the life that feels meaningful to you. It does not matter how many years have already passed. What matters is what you do with the awareness you have now. So instead of asking whether it is too late, ask yourself a better question. What kind of life do I want to build from this moment forward? Because the moment you begin living with clarity, courage, and intention, your next chapter has already begun.